on this episode of A Tale of Two Hygienists.
Both of us heard someone just recently say that dental sleep medicine is actually 80% sleep medicine and 20% dental. It's not really something that comes like naturally, that just, even though it has the word dental at the beginning of it, you really need to know a whole lot about the medical side.
You are uniquely qualified to be evaluating the airway, and you're already doing it even if you know nothing about airway and sleep. A hygienist is going to notice the Malampati score. They're going to notice if you can see tonsils, if the tongue is big, if it's a scalloped tongue. So these are things that the hygienists might already be seeing, and they're probably already making a note of it.
Even just knowing that oral appliance therapy is a viable option, I'm telling you right now, there are going to be patients that sit down in the chair in front of you and they have already been tested, they've already been diagnosed, and they've already tried CPAP and they've failed. Just say there is another option. Just giving that information can literally save that person's life.
Yeah, this is a tale, oh yeah, a tale of two hygienists. So there might be only one, bringing the best of dental knowledge, and we do it all with ease. We cover oral health and screening, and preventing gum disease. We're gonna do a lot of learning, and have a little bit of fun working at the dentist. A tale of two hygienists.
Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of A Tale of Two Hygienists podcast, episode number 478. My name is Andrew. I'm your host, and thank you so much for being with us today. Well, I am not exactly sure where in the world Allison and I are at the exact moment that this episode is supposed to come out, but we are somewhere. We are having a great time, and I can't wait to share it all with you. But because we are still going to be off for these next few weeks, I thought we would rebroadcast some oldies but goodies, and today is no exception to that rule. In today's episode, we focus on sleep. Sleep has been some of the hottest downloaded episodes that we've ever done, and so we decided to bring on Teresa and Drew again in this episode that originally aired in March of 2023. And while the episode has been up for a few years already, or a couple of years already, most of this content is just as relevant as always. So be sure to give it a listen and make sure you pick up those tips and tricks. We'll talk to you next week.
A tale of two hygienists.
Welcome, everyone, into the interview portion of the podcast. I'm really excited. We are talking again today about sleep. It's actually been quite a while since we've discussed this. And so we've brought on two amazing guests, Teresa and Drew. Welcome to the show.
Hey, thank you.
Hi, thanks for having us.
So first things first, we'd love to get to know you a little bit better. So do you mind just taking a few minutes and talking about your backgrounds and like who you are and where you're coming from?
So we are from Sleep Better NYC, which is a company for virtual sleep coaching and care coordination. We offer online support specifically for patients of dental sleep practitioners, and that's to help improve case acceptance and adherence to oral appliance therapy for those sleep apnea patients and people who are snoring. So I have a background in oral appliance therapy. Actually, I spent, I think, about 13 years in medical and dental sales before I got into sleep with an oral appliance company. And almost immediately, I would say it was like maybe 2 or 3 days into the job, I realized the incredible need for patient education as well as dental education and honestly even medical education on sleep. It seemed like everybody I was talking to had a sleep question, and even the patients in the dentist office who were about to be treated for sleep apnea just had no idea what was going on or what to expect next. So I became pretty obsessed pretty quickly. Eventually, I got my own clinical credential, the CCSH, and started Sleep Better NYC.
Teresa, but what is a CCSH?
So the CCSH credential is something that Drew and I both have, and we really encourage it for anybody interested in sleep. It's certification in clinical sleep health.
Yes. And I'm Drew. So I've been on the medical side of sleep for about 20 years now. I'm a sleep technologist by trade. I spent over a decade running those overnight sleep studies in a sleep lab. I worked with pediatrics and adults. For about 5 years, I ran a sleep program for a pretty big health system up in New York. And now I'm working with Teresa in Sleep Better NYC. And I also run a home sleep testing company so that I can help get these patients diagnosed. So
just all sleep all the time.
Yeah, we're just
between
sleep
the two
nerds.
of us.
Yeah, we just, can't stop thinking about it, talking about it.
Oh my gosh. Just from those little intros, I have like 8 notes that we're going to have to talk about
Perfect.
in addition to what we've already like kind of talked about. So can we jump into something maybe just a little bit different from the intros is medical dental integration?
Yeah.
Can you explain to me kind of what were you seeing or what have you seen as being the problems? And then what kind of solutions are we working on?
Yeah, well, I mean, that's really what we've identified at Sleep at NYC for dental sleep medicine, which is the main problems that we've tended to see are patient education, making sure that the patients are educated. Both of us heard someone just recently say that dental sleep medicine is actually 80% sleep medicine and 20% dental.
Mhm.
So it's not technically, it's not really something that comes like naturally, that just, even though it has the word dental at the beginning of it, you really need to know a whole lot about the medical side. So
And
education.
dentists haven't, until even recently, dentists weren't really taught a lot about it in residency or anything. I mean, now it's a lot more common, but most of the time dentists have to go out of their way to really get more education in this. It's just so different from general dentistry. From what I've seen, and I think any dentist or hygienist listening to this, if you have experience with sleep, you'll find that most of the time you see a patient, it has been years that they have had a problem before they actually find a dentist, or they've actually even gone to a sleep doctor in general. They just don't know.
Right. Well, and I think it's something ridiculous. Like there's like 2 or 4 hours on sleep throughout the entire, like in both in medical school and in dental school. Like, so all that to say, we're not talking down to anyone. We're not saying if you don't know about this, we're just saying you've not had the opportunity and you're not sleep nerds like us. So education is what we found as one of the biggest things there. And then when we're talking about the integration between dental and medical, it is care coordination.
There's a lot of back and forth that happens, and it's where a lot of patients, when they actually finally start getting some help, then they all kind of slip through the cracks because, I mean, frankly, it's very fragmented in sleep. It's a lot of back and forth. It's prescribing from a doctor, but seeing a dentist, and then getting treated by a dentist, but getting tested by a doctor. So we get it. It's complicated. Yeah.
So that's what we've experienced. And, we're obsessed with the idea of remote patient monitoring, remote therapy monitoring. That's kind of the next big thing here, I think, for oral appliance therapy. For patients who are put on CPAP, that's kind of a given. We know that. Anyone who wears a CPAP, most of them have the little modem in the back and it pushes your data. Your doctor can look at it. And we just haven't had that in the oral appliance yet. It's on the way, though. And we're hoping to be involved in that as that comes about for oral appliance.
Do you feel like the education part, I mean, obviously it was very lacking for the doctors for a really long time, but now the auxiliaries are starting to have courses and things like that. You'll see them like at the Chicago Midwinters or Greater New York dental meetings. Is that also happening on the medical side where the auxiliaries are starting to be able to talk to the patients a little bit more about that?
Yeah, I think that's a really good place where you can say, I mean, again, our credential as CCSH is a huge example of this. There's a reason that they have these other credentials so that we can talk to the patients. Even the sleep talks, tell them about maybe your experience and having that like audience with that patient.
Yeah. So, I mean, on the medical side for many, many years, there's actually been, roles like asthma educators or diabetes educators. And the goal of having those roles there are, physicians and dentists, that they're incredibly smart and they know what they're doing. There's no reason they cannot educate, but there's no reason why someone else can't. Too. And so if you really want to have, an efficient operation, if you want everyone to be operating at the top of their license, it doesn't always make sense for, someone who has, who's a licensed provider to be spending, 15, 20 minutes, half an hour talking to that patient. Why not have some, maybe I'll get in trouble for saying this, but I actually once, after I got my CCSH, I was talking to a sleep physician and, talking about educating patients. And this physician said, well, that's something I do. I said, sure, but I also can't prescribe medication and you can. And to be just honest, doc, I'm better than you at educating the patients because this is what I do. This is
right.
There's a difference between knowing the information and being able to communicate it well.
Yeah, I think hygienists will really relate to this, or even dental assistants too. Well, they'll say like, we know that the patients are a lot more comfortable talking to the hygienist. They're maybe a little more open and honest. And we see that in medical too. They may be a little bit more forthcoming with information to, auxiliary staff or the nurse or the PA versus actually telling the doctor. So it's super important for everybody to get involved.
Yeah. I think one of the things the listeners are probably really tired of me talking about his business all the time. I talk about business and dentistry just ad nauseum. And I think the whole thing about right now, we're seeing this big shift of, there were not enough hygienists for a really long time. They were probably underpaid in most markets. Now then, with the shortage, everyone's getting paid a lot more. And now the doctors are looking at this as, look, we can't afford to keep you on staff and doing exactly the same things that you've been doing over and over and over again. And to your point, I think that, hygienists and assistants are really good communicators. We spend so much time with our patients that this might be something that we look at and say, okay, well, how can we make sure that from a business perspective, we're able to, monetize this ability to communicate better and bringing sleep into our practices. And so I guess my next question is my assumption is that dental offices are like the prime location to do screenings for sleep. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, well, and actually, this is probably what Teresa was trying to nudge me to say before. But when I had that conversation with that physician, it was when I was a night tech running those overnight sleep studies. And one of the nice things about that was, in every case, that patient had already been seen by a physician. So they already been screened, they already knew they're coming in. But I was able to sit there and I had 30 to 45 minutes while I was putting all the sensors on that patient where I just had a captive audience. They were stuck there. They couldn't go anywhere. And so they had to listen to me.
Sounds like they're a hostage, right?
Right. But
you call it captive audience, we call it hostage, but whatever.
Sure. Yeah, whatever. I mean, it's just,
very normal.
Yeah, nuance. But when a hygienist has that patient in the chair, I mean, what are they going to do? They're not going to leave. They're not going to run away. So
hopefully not if they hear this.
Right.
But I mean, if you're also talking about the business sense, again, in medical it is a little different. There are more codes to bill for this time and for the education. We are seeing that kind of spill into dentistry and people testing out different codes. So, I mean, that's one way. But also, of course, yes, we want to be good for the patients. We want to educate the patients. But really, if we're being honest here, the goal is to get them into therapy, which does provide more revenue for the dental practice. So yeah, potentially there are more codes for the education or for follow-up and monitoring, but at the moment, it still potentially leads to more revenue with acceptance of therapy.
Yeah, it doesn't take very many oral appliances to add a pretty significant profit to that office. I mean, I was shocked when I first got it. Again, I've only been on the dental side of things and knowing this for maybe 4 or 5 years. Just shocked with how few oral appliances most dentists who practice it do. I mean, we're doing, hundreds of sleep studies a month and, all the... So
3 of those get it.
Right. And so there's a significant ROI if a dental practice is willing to get their team trained, free them to provide that education, get them trained on a little bit of that care coordination, and just get a few patients through the process. It's always going to work. Yeah.
I think that makes us go back to the question that you actually asked us, which was about screening. So wait, what were you asking about screening?
Screening, yeah.
Oh, the hygienist and the other staff members able to do the screening. Yeah, absolutely. And we're telling dental providers this all the time when they first get into it, if maybe they have a little bit of imposter syndrome or something, that you are uniquely qualified to be evaluating the airway, and you're already doing it even if you know nothing about airway and sleep. A hygienist is going to notice the Mallampati score. They're going to notice if you can see tonsils, if the tongue is big, if it's a scalloped tongue. They might notice, whether the patient tells them or not, they'll probably notice if the patient has inflammation from snoring or if they have signs of acid reflux or GERD. And maybe bruxism. Yes, look at you, a dental term. So these are things that the hygienists might already be seeing, and they're probably already making a note of it. They just might not be relating that to sleep, but it's nothing totally crazy.
Is there, I don't know if this is on your end or if this is a different resource that they need to find, but is there a checklist that they could then maybe integrate with their medical dental history for a screening?
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm sure that
step by step, this is what you do.
That might even be something that the AADSM or the ADA might have. Let's just take a pause for a second and say this. We're giving all the reasons why screening should be really, really important. Another big reason is it's actually the guidelines.
It's an ADA recommendation since 2017 that all dental providers should be screening for sleep apnea. Now, I think every time I say that, I have to remind them that doesn't mean that you have to be treating those patients. We know some people that simply don't want to get into sleep, but it is pretty important that you are screening, even if you refer those patients out, the same way you refer patients out maybe for a root canal or orthodontics, it is a recommendation by the ADA. And of course, also by the AA DSM, which is the American Academy of Dental Sleep Medicine.
Yeah. And like you said, when it comes to kind of the paperwork, there are screening tools. There's something called a Stop Bang, STOPBANG. That's a really common one. There's also the ESS, or the Epworth Sleepiness Score. Tossing one of those in does give you a pretty good read as to whether that patient, what their likelihood is of having OSA, how sleepy they are. But it's not everything. I mean, you can also you can glean as all the, signs and physical indications of it, yeah. It seems like such a big thing. Everyone, whenever we talk to people, we're like, there's no time. But no one's asking for the hygienist, be spending an extra half an hour per patient or anything like that.
And even with the intake forms you have, again, this is going to vary per practice, but you, again, might have some of that information already, depending on what you're collecting as far as medical history. And it would really just take someone who's trained or educated a little on sleep to be able to point out red flags. So if you have an intake form that happens to mention high blood pressure or hypertension, if it mentions that they have, a history of cardiac or pulmonary disease, those are already red flags that they are very likely to have a sleep-related breathing disorder.
Right.
So tell me the step after that. So, well, first of all, I do want to address the fact that you're like, well, they're recommended to do the screening. Doesn't mean that I have to take any action after that and, provide appliances and things like that. I'll tell you what, noticing dentists, knowing them the way I do, they're not going to even want to open up that liability for doing the screening and then not taking any action after that. They're going to be like, nope, we're not. We're just going to turn a blind eye to it.
Sure.
Or maybe they don't even know about that recommendation then too. I think that, in your practices, you kind of get tunnel vision. You kind of let all of these acronymed organizations do their thing, and you're just doing your thing that you've been doing for 25 years,
Absolutely.
The question that I want to kind of lead into is, so that we do the screening.
Yep.
We find somebody that maybe is indicative of having a sleep disorder. Do they go and do the overnight sleep test now, and that's the next step, or what steps maybe are in between?
So, excellent question. In many states, I think it's like 43 of them or something.
The vast majority of states.
Yeah, a dentist can actually order that sleep study. You'd have to check to see what your states are, what your state guidelines are. We're both in New York, and New York is one of the states where our dentists cannot.
New York, New Jersey, Georgia actually just changed the rules.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah.
So in most cases, again, you've gone through the process, you've screened them, you think they have a high likelihood, that dentist can order the sleep study, and that patient can go directly to, it can be a local sleep lab. There are online, you do a quick Google search of online home sleep test, and you'll find at least a dozen different ways that can be done. Some of them, you would just have to upload the order from the dentist, and the patient can go ahead and get tested that way. They would ship them a device. Not everyone has to go into the sleep lab. I want to make sure that that's clear too. Especially since COVID, there's been a massive shift. I think it went from 60% in-lab sleep testing and 40% home sleep testing to a complete switch of that. Now it's about 60% of patients are tested with a home sleep study. So either your local sleep lab or an online group will make sure that patient gets the sleep study. If, for some reason there is something with their insurance, they'll run their insurance for them. If they need to see a physician, they can arrange for a telemedicine visit. But it is actually much, much easier. I know people don't want to open up Pandora's box. They don't want to screen because they have to do the work. But once you do a couple of these, the referral process can be so easy.
Yeah, especially for some of those online sleep testing programs. We're not affiliated with any, but we've used them ourselves too, because, and a quick note, even if you're in a state and you are a dentist able to order the sleep study, all of these sleep studies do still need to be read and evaluated by a sleep physician. And again, those virtual companies will have a sleep physician typically that works with them. So they still need that diagnosis and for that physician to make a prescription. So that's sometimes where the confusion is too. Right. For dentists, they don't know how to get that prescription. And so they think they have to send the patient to the pulmonologist down the street. Right. Of course, if you know that pulmonologist, go ahead and do that. But if you use another service, they will also have a sleep doctor to be able to write that prescription.
Oh, that's a great point. That's a good point. So did you say that you had both done sleep studies yourselves, like the take-home ones? Have you also done the overnight ones?
Yeah.
So when the patient gets the results, is that when now you guys come in and help do things, or are you guys coming in earlier in the process?
So it depends. Well, I have a home sleep testing company. And so in my case, if someone is screened in a dental practice, they would be sent to me and I would go through that process. Now, I also have, I call them sleep care managers, but it's a sleep coach, like a lot of what we do. And these are people who would educate the patient on OSA and the sleep study device and all the therapy options. In some cases, they can help the patient maybe explain the results of the sleep study if, especially if they're going to, we're in New York City and we have lots of big like health systems. And sometimes your visit with the physician is, 15 minutes. And, you got 15 minutes with a physician who's going to try to explain all of your results, who's going to give you all the therapy options and answer all your questions. And so that's where we can step in.
So when we get people coming in, from social media or like a referral, typically we'll find that they are undiagnosed. They're very curious, or maybe they were diagnosed like 10 years ago and never did anything about it. So in that case, we'll typically refer for these online sleep testing programs so that they can get a diagnosis from a physician. But generally, when we're working with the dental patients, of course, they're already patients of a dentist. At that point, they're usually diagnosed already, because then we help them along the rest of their sleep journey and, talking about the oral appliance or other options that, they might have questions about.
And I'll say this real quick when it comes to the hygienist. Sorry, this is one of those things that just came to my head right now. Mm-hmm. And, I'm just going to say it, even though we haven't cleared it.
Okay.
Yeah, sometimes I get in trouble with just saying things. But
this isn't live, man. We can always edit it out later if you don't like what you say.
So I would say that it's really important for an assistant or hygienist to learn about all of sleep, but even just knowing that oral appliance therapy is a viable option. I'm telling you right now, there are going to be patients that sit down in the chair in front of you and they have already been tested, they've already been diagnosed, and they've already tried CPAP and they've failed it. Mm-hmm. And they will never, ever get tested again because they do not want to use CPAP. That is the perfect patient to just say, even if you're still early on in this, to say, listen, I don't know a ton about all that, but you've already been through the process. I do want to tell you, though, there is another option. Just giving that information I'm going to be really dramatic here, can literally save that person's life.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. I love that. That's a really, really good point. Yeah. You can know the bare minimum and it's still more information that they might have been given.
Yeah.
So my assumption is there's lots of different types of devices. There's definitely lots of different names of devices. Mm-hmm. How do you all stay current with what each individual patient is using? Or is it generally the same methods, they're just called a different thing?
There are hundreds of different oral appliances FDA cleared. I would say there's probably maybe 5, big name brands that most patients would have. They have different mechanisms, but they are all meant to do the same thing if it's considered an oral appliance. So they're all meant to hold the airway open, to move the mandible forward just a few millimeters and keep that jaw and that tongue from falling back. So no matter what device you use, they're doing that in some way. So they're made from different materials. They're adjusted in different ways, but most of them do look pretty different. And most patients, even if they don't know what, they're being prescribed, by the time they get it, it does have a brand name on it. So if they had a specific question, we would be able to, look that up and tell them.
All right. So the auxiliary listening to this, the hygienist, the dental assistant, whoever is wanting to be trained or some sort of certification or education, how do they obtain that? Where do they go for this?
Teresa, do you want to say this one?
Yeah, so there are lots and lots of online courses and in-person courses. There's probably some stuff going on at Chicago Midwinter. We know a lot of those companies. You can always ask us if you want a recommendation. We do have a quick 1 CE course if you are a member of Ignite University. That is specifically for future sleep champions in a dental practice or sleep coach in the dental practice. Of course, we also really recommend the credential that we have, which is the CCSH. That is a lot more in depth. There is a board certification for that. And then we also are working on something else that's sort of in between, if you want to mention that.
But real quick, the one that you have through Ignite, does that help them at all with the CCSH?
That will give them instructions on how to become a CCSH.
Okay. Yeah, so we have a clinical sleep training course. We're in the process of getting it approved for CE credit, but really what that does is it focuses on, it doesn't focus on anything actually. It just gives you the entire overview of what this sleep, especially the sleep apnea ecosystem is. So it'll, tells you what the signs and symptoms are, what the typical patient journey really looks like, going to the physician, and then, in-lab versus home sleep testing. What do they test for? And how does the physician choose which one they should have? And then after that, even going into the interpretation of those different things, the home sleep test or the in-lab, and then a full view of all the different treatment options. One of the reasons why we're super excited about this remote monitoring of patients is we don't have yet a really great way to predict which patient's going to do well on which therapy. So it's kind of a guessing game. We've got some data, but it's kind of a guessing game. We really are hoping for the day when, one, we have better ways to predict it, but two, that we can try them on CPAP. If it doesn't work, immediately get them over to oral appliance or vice versa. Or, there's surgical interventions. There's, they're even looking at medication now that can help. And so there's
so just knowing all those options and having the basics of all of them is really important. Again,
Yes.
We're going to recommend the board certification, but if you don't want to go into that depth, there are other options. There are weekend courses, online courses, and send us an email. I'm sure it'll be in the show notes, but you can email us or find us on Instagram. We'll make some recommendations on that.
Yeah, and I'm going to even try to find like a local, if you look up like your state sleep society or local sleep conferences, there's always a national one. I mean, that's the reason I got into kind of what I'm doing right now is I just went to some of these conferences. I started with the local ones and I just got fascinated by this stuff. So yeah.
I would say you also have a wonderful website that has some really interesting blog posts. So if anyone's listening to this and you're like, look, I kind of maybe want to dip my toe into a little bit, just start reading some of the blog stuff like that you guys have posted like that. I think that was, really phenomenal and fascinating. I think that'll kind of help someone make their decisions. Any last advice for our clinicians that are listening to us before we end this?
Yes. So anyone who's getting anxiety listening to this about all this work, there's two things I'll say. So, one, if you are interested, so let's say you're in a practice and you're not doing dental sleep medicine, but like it's being thrown up in the air, you can be the champion for that. Go to the rest of the team and say, I think we can do this. That means like I said, that actually gives you a return on the investment. If you're going to get your education, you're going to take forth this effort in screening, you actually do something at the end of it financially. But more importantly, almost every single time we've talked to someone who's gone from just doing general dentistry and dipped their toe into sleep and has kept going in sleep, what they always say is the change in their patients' lives is what drives them. We've all had a bad night's sleep. And if anyone's like a parent, you've definitely had like months of bad nights, and you know what it's like to not be able to sleep. Someone who has OSA, that's their life. That's their steady state of just being tired of. And so if you can be the person just by, talking to them a little bit, reviewing a little bit of extra paperwork, helping them with coordinating the testing, letting someone else do it, and then giving them that device, it literally can be life-changing. And so if nothing else, that could be a reason for you to do this.
Yeah. Talk about happy referrals.
Yeah.
Bed partners, friends, family.
Yeah.
It's a good source of referrals for sure.
Plus,
just get started.
Plus you can be like us, and our party trick is to like actually go to parties and just talk about sleep, like to anyone who asks. So yeah, you can just be that person.
You're like, let me screen you real quick. Open wide. See your mouth.
We're looking at them without them even asking for our opinions. We're like, do you see that person's jaw? They definitely have sleep apnea.
I know.
Do you think they mouth breathe? Definitely.
I'm walking around like slapping home sleep tests on people without them looking. Yeah. I'm not doing that. I'm not doing that. I'm not actually doing
once
that.
Once you start learning about it, once you start going to any of these courses, or if you hopefully start working with us in some way, you will start to notice it everywhere. The statistics, the amount of people who have sleep apnea is just outrageous. So once you start, you're going to start seeing it everywhere. Everybody who gets involved in sleep loves it. Now, the practicality of it and the logistics and everything can be difficult, sure, but just get started.
And I promise, if you're a listener right now who decides to get into sleep because of hearing this, and you reach out to us once you've got your CCSH gone through it, we will have you on an IG Live, right?
Yeah.
I don't know how.
Hygienists are notoriously introverted human beings. I'm not sure if that's a plug
okay.
But that was very nice of you to. If anyone wants it, hey, it's out there now.
Yeah. We will not have you on an IG Live. Yeah, that's better.
We will not make you talk to us.
That's the carrot that you're dangling. I love it. Awesome. So everyone, check out the show notes. We have their contact information. Sleep Better NYC. Check out their Instagram, LinkedIn, and if you have any questions, make sure you guys reach out. Thanks for being on.
Thank you.
Thanks so much.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is a tale, oh yeah, a tale of two hygienists. there might be only one, bringing the best of dental knowledge, and we do it all with ease. We cover oral health and screening, and preventing gum disease. We're gonna do a lot of learning, and have a little bit of fun working at the dentist. A tale of two hygienists.